Good evening, every pony and every creature. Welcome to tonight's stream at DAG. This is Dratta Arcana. How y'all doing? So as the title suggests, we're going to be looking at an in-depth review of Sounds of Silence. I was unfortunately not able to get someone to join me with the stream tonight, so it's just me, just your lovely Alicorn Dratta Arcana. So remember, no but Drattas. Yeah. So anyways, guys, welcome to tonight's stream. I'll have some news at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and jump right into this and talk about one of the most well-received, I think, episodes in the series, or at least of season 8. I shouldn't say series because there were like a gazillion better episodes. So don't be like Bud Dratta on that. But definitely this was one of my more favorite episodes in season 8. And it did provide a lot of additional stuff. So let's jump into it. As always, welcome to Dratta Talks, where I talk about everything MLP related. Woo! Alright. So here we go, guys. By the way, before we get started, this will contain spoilers. So, spoiler alert. So, just keep in mind that this whole video is nothing but spoilers if you have not watched the episode, which it's been out now for like several months. So, if you've missed it, don't watch this episode. Okay, here we go. Alright, first let's drop some different things that I want to talk about versus what a lot of analysis people do. And this is where Dratta Arcana, Dratta Talks is different. We're going to be looking at, when we look at an episode, we look at the fandom's response, the characters, the acting, the music, if it has music, and we'll look at the history and mythology used in the episode if it has new characters or new creatures in it. And we'll be looking at the overall story. Note, the numbers in this slide do not represent the order of sequence of this presentation. These are just the overall things that we will be looking at. Okay, with what we're going to be looking at out of the way, let's talk a little bit about stuff that most of the time we will not be looking at. We're not going to be looking directly at anything very specific to the main six. I could go on and on about how AJ and Fluttershy, or Twilight, or Rarity, or Rainbow Dash, or Pinkie Pie, how they're just not acting like themselves, or they're not behaving like themselves. Or I could talk about how the Tree of Harmony is interjecting and stuff. Or I could talk about, hey, they should have used that spell to, go from, here to here. They should have just teleported, or Twilight could have teleported them. I'm not going to talk about how ridiculous the cutie mark map is. Or, that doesn't make any sense. That wasn't there on the map before, or whatever. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty and analysis, because I'm trying to be objective rather than try to put down the episodes. So with that out of the way, I will immediately apologize. I do not have visual slides for the actual overall story. So you're going to have to deal with just listening to me. This is to prevent copyright issues. So here we go. All right, general story. So, the general story is that it starts off with AJ and Fluttershy being called by the cutie map for a friendship quest to the Peaks of Peril, which, according to Twilight, the Kirin live there, along with a mysterious other creature called a Neeric. So, with that knowledge, Fluttershy and AJ catch a train to pretty much the end of the line, and they arrive at the Peaks of Peril, and what happens is that they get scared by the conductor that's stationed there and stuff. And then they start traveling. Well, we see a lot of AJ going along and somehow loses Fluttershy. And with that, Fluttershy kind of gets stuck helping out some squirrels because it's Fluttershy, you know. So that's important to note. She helps those squirrels and everything. And then AJ comes back after all these trials that she feels like that she has to do again. But they find Fluttershy, and AJ keeps ignoring her, and Fluttershy finally yells at her and says, "Hey, the squirrels told me of a shortcut." Hooray for shortcuts. So they get to the village, and we see the Kirans for the first time. I do not have an image of it, but we will get to that here in a moment. So with that, they discover that the Kirans are unable to talk. The Kirans understand them, but they can't speak. So eventually AJ goes looking for a Kiran that talks, basically. And who we discover is... wrong side. We discover this character, Autumn Blaze. And, sorry, if you saw the last slide, spoiler alert for later in this video. Autumn Blaze shows up, who originally fools Applejack into thinking that she doesn't talk, and then finally starts speaking and starts messing up her words, just like Dratta, who can't tell the difference between the word a while in while. You know, because Dratta can't speak, you know, whatever. So basically what happens is that Autumn Blaze tells AJ in the form of a gorgeous song, which we will get into later, called A Kiran Tale. And in the song, we see one of my most favorite musicals referenced. And that is Phantom of the Opera. Now, I've actually been to Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, so it was really obvious to me. But it's a good way to... And I like how Autumn Blaze says musical theater. I know I wasn't going to talk about how she acts and stuff, but Phantom of the Opera is a musical theater. It's a musical, not an opera. That might be something that maybe not a lot of people realize. So we have a Phantom of the Opera reference. There's also a couple other references throughout the episode, which I'm not going to go too deep into. I just wanted to point out Phantom of the Opera because if you don't know what Phantom of the Opera is, or you haven't seen the musical, you wouldn't necessarily get these scenes. So it's important to note, you know, that this was a Phantom of the Opera reference. Okay. So anyways, Autumn Blaze goes ahead and basically explains how the Kirans lost their voice. It was, the way it worked was that there was some argument in the square between two friends, and they caught fire, turning into Nyrics, a creature of flame, basically, according to the show. We'll get into the Nyrics later. So what ended up happening was to prevent them from having anger, which is an emotion that everyone possesses. Instead, they all walked into the pool or stream of silence, and basically it made them all mute and without emotion. I can understand wanting to take an immediate action to stop anger, but if you don't solve anger at the root, and I'll get into all this later, actually. So they enter the pool of silence. They can no longer talk. Eventually, Autumn Blaze can't stand it being silenced, and she's a heavy talker. Like me, like Dratta. Dratta's a heavy talker. I mean, seriously, I really am. You wouldn't know it. But, so she gets a cure called Fool's Breath. Can't speak. Me no speak good. Apparently I should just be silent, you know, just like the Kirins. But what ends up happening is she cures her voice, is banished from the village for having her voice and stuff. So after learning this, Applejack returns to Fluttershy, and they have a disagreement. Fluttershy thinks that them having the chance to become Nerex is a bad thing, and AJ thinks that them not having emotions is a bad thing, and they get into an argument, and the Kirins think that this argument is bad. So what happens is that they're worried that Applejack and Fluttershy will turn into Nerex. So they try to take him to the Pool of Silence. Autumn Blaze shows up. I have to say this, coincidence much? I mean, how would she know that they were even in danger? But that's a nitpick for another day. So what happens is that Autumn Blaze pretty much saves them by turning into a Nerex, using the flame, using anger to direct her anger towards something. Now, I'll get into anger a little later. So, what ends up happening is that, so AJ and Fluttershy get saved, and they have this long conversation, and apparently the Kirins now want to be cured because they think that having their voice and emotions is actually a good thing, as long as when they're angry, they could take time to step aside and stuff. Well, there's no more cure. Well, it turns out that the animals that Fluttershy saved or helped with their nest earlier in the episode just happened to be that Fluttershy picked up Foal's breath. And boom, everyone's cured. Okay, that's the story in a nutshell. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the acting in this. I think the acting was okay. I know that it's really hard for actors to give voice to something that doesn't exist. So voice actors actually have a lot harder of a job than people seem to think. Because giving voice to something that doesn't exist, that you can't actually see or touch, can be a bit of a challenge. So Autumn Blaze, the star of our episode, who seemed to solve the friendship problem for Applejack and Fluttershy, or even with their help, was played by Rachel Bloom. And I think that she did a fabulous job with Autumn Blaze's voice. She did a great job with it. And I think that it really, the character in the writing really fit the personality of the character. So, and all the Kirins, when they finally spoke, I didn't have a chance to look up the actress and actors' names yet, but, so I apologize immediately. But all their information should be on IMDb. So if you want to look up the actors and actresses later, that's fine. It's just I don't have the time in these streams to go over every tiny little single person. Okay. With the overall acting covered and the overall story covered, let's talk about something a little bit more factual. Okay. So let's talk about Kirin history. Okay. So Kirins were, as you can see, there's a giraffe on screen. Now, what happened was that back in Chinese history, during one of the dynasties, there was a, in charge of a fleet, a person by the name of Zhang He. Now, I apologize to China and everyone from China regarding their history in the name of that. If I mispronounced it, please correct me if I'm wrong. Traveled to Africa and returned with 2 giraffes, which were basically depicted in mythology as a Kirin. Now, Kirins in mythology are, in some mythologies, are a chimerical animal. So they're basically a chimera made of different animals. In part, and in some mythologies, they're considered to be a draconical chimera, meaning that they have dragon-like properties. So they're considered a partial dragon, typically depicted with a horn. Now, as far as, Kirins go, generally their typical element is actually sometimes considered lightning, as depicted in Monster Hunter, the video game. Some people declare that they're fire. It really depends on the mythology that you're going to look at. On the side note, if we look at the mythology of Nyryx, also known as Indrix, which is a Russian folklore. Now, I may have gotten that wrong, so anyone can correct me on this. But basically is, in German folklore, also a chimerical animal consisting of several different animals. It is considered to be the king of all beasts. And it makes its home on the Holy Mountain. Now, because of that, you could say that the Kirins in this MLP episode represent both the king of all animals, which would explain Autumn Blaze's affiliation with nature. You could also take it as it being the Holy Mountain. So, because the Peaks of Peril look basically like a holy landscape when you see it in the beginning of when Autumn Blaze is showing AJ the, land beyond. It looks like a holy place. So it could be taken from both German mythology as well as other mythologies as well, from Japan, which is where the word Kirin comes from. Now, so you can look at it in several different ways. If you look at it as the Nyryx, it shows that they are presenting themselves as the king of all beasts and everything, while they're also considered, in their happier form, could represent, because also you got to remember in history, Kirins are from Japanese history are considered to represent an imminent arrival of a sage, the death of a sage, and the arrival of a great ruler or king, or the death of a great ruler or king, whenever a Kirin would appear. Now, if we look at that and we compare it to MLP, we can look at it as the Kirin are wise and very intelligent creatures. They have a wisdom about them. They feel like that they're some kind of sage in the episode. So you definitely get that radiance from them. They're a great sage, but they also feel like a king of all beasts on a holy mountain too when they turn into a Nyryx. So you can see that the MLP writers did their research on Kirins and Nyryx in multiple different mythologies, taking them from those aspects. Now, I can't say that's what the writers were going for, but that's more or less what I am seeing. Now, the Kirin in this story, in this episode, you could also look at it, if you look at the history a little deeper, this episode airs right before the finale. Literally right before the finale, and I'm sorry I'm going to spoil the finale for all of you. I will not be doing a review on Season 8 finale because I did a blind reaction on it. But when Cozy Glow traps Twilight and all them, once again, spoiler alerts, if you haven't watched it, I am spoiling Season 8 now. I already spoiled it, so it's too late for that. But if you look at it for the next part of the episodes, the next two episodes, you could say that the appearance of these Kirins show an imminent sage or an imminent new ruler. If you look at it that way. So maybe the writers were saying, hey, we got this finale coming up where Cozy Glow might become the ruler of the School of Friendship. Why don't we just put Kieran's and see if anyone recognizes the imminent appearance of a sage or new ruler? So you could look at that. So maybe it was a prediction for us, but maybe people didn't realize that. Now let's talk a little bit about the vow of silence. So here's where I'm going to talk about anger and all that. I do not think that it was kind of like, why would you take a vow of silence when it's just anger? You knew that anger is a bad emotion, but so I feel like that it's easy to misinterpret anger. It's easy to misinterpret many emotions. Anger is always a secondary emotion. It is not a primary. Okay, I've studied enough psychology to where I almost became a counselor, but that never happened. But if you look psychologically, anger is always a secondary emotion, meaning that it is not the first emotion. There is always an emotion that triggers anger. Now, what that can be is frustration. That can be stress. It can be, sadness even. It could be anxiety. It could be, there's hundreds of different emotions that it could be that trigger you to have anger. A lot of times, the two prominent ones are usually going to be frustration or stress. So, because it was an argument that caused everyone to become lyrics, and they had to take a vow of silence to stop it, was mostly because I think of frustration and stress. I think that the stress of everything burning down and everything is what caused the anger to become so prevalent. Okay. What did I think overall of this entire episode? Just from the story and everything I've researched and stuff. I think it was a great episode. But there's more to it, too. And that was the music. And this is a little different. Okay, the music was originally written by Jim Miller and fine-tuned by Nicole Dubach. And I think that, once again, I probably messed up the name. I'm terrible with names. Dratta's terrible with names. I think that overall, the song that was in it, A Kieran's Tale, it's one of my favorite songs in season 8. Honestly, I do love this song because the song tells it very, very straight. You cannot have one thing without the other. And you can't always have the best of both worlds. It's a common metaphor of, it's the perfect example of yin and yang, where you have on one end the shadow, the darkness, evil, and then you have on the other good, light, hope, happiness. Everything is a yin and yang balance in life. What makes you happy and what makes you mad are always two sides of the same coin. This is the case with everything. There is always a downside to something. It could be very, very minor. It could be very, very big. There is always a downside to everything. And you have to remember that. Sometimes the downside will come later, sometimes not. And that's just life. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what this episode did in the fandom. Okay. We all remember when Twilight got wings. Then we started having Alicorn OCs. We started having, everyone going bonkers about Twilight having wings, songs being written, remembrance being made and stuff. Well, when the Kierans dropped, everything exploded again. This doesn't happen often in the fandom, and I think as bronies and as people that enjoy the show, it is fine for us to be like, okay, we have a new creature, we have a new thing to do, so let's make all the art in the world. And everyone looked at Autumn Blaze. All of a sudden, this design was being used by everyone in the fandom. People wanting Kieran OCs. People wanting to turn, things like Twilight into a Kieran, Applejack into a Kieran, Luna into a Kieran. We were just seeing so much Kieran art, Kieran stuff. We are seeing so much of it now because it is popular. And I don't want to discourage people from doing that, but I don't think that everyone needs to have a Kieran OC. I don't think we need to start taking Dratta Arcana and turning him into a Kieran because he's an alicorn. All right? I'm not going to change my OC to a Kieran because that's the hip thing to do. With that said, I like the Kieran's design and the art that people are producing. And I think that that's great. It provides people with more creative outlook. And this episode has had an impact on the fandom that we haven't seen in a long, long time. And a lot of people were displeased with the new changeling designs. When dragons were introduced and stuff, we had all the dragon art coming out. The half ponies, half dragons, and all that. But the Kieran design is an explosion in fan art, fan design that we haven't seen all season. So I encourage people, to do what they want to do with these new designs. If they want to make more OCs and more characters, that's fine. I'm okay with that. As a fan of the show, this was a great episode. But I'm not going to go out of my way to make everything Kieran. It's just not who I am. I'm going to stick with my alicorn for now, is basically what I'm saying. So I think that overall, great episode. The reaction to the fandom was explosive with this episode. And that's a good and great thing. And I'm happy for the fandom that we have this now. Especially as we're nearing the end. Season 9's coming up, folks. Anyways, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for what I was going to cover. If you feel like I missed anything, if you feel like that I didn't say enough but Drattas, always put but Dratta and mention what I missed. Be like, but Dratta, you should have talked about this. You should have mentioned some more names. You should have done this. You should have done that. Okay. Anyways, guys, let's talk about some news. Okay. Because of certain factors, I will not be streaming an episode live next weekend or the weekend after. Instead, these will be uploaded. So because of the way that Twitch is now doing things, I can't upload these and just schedule the premiere on Twitch. So the next 2 episodes will not be live, but they will be published. They will be actively published at 8 o'clock EST. So that means that if you want to view it at 8 o'clock EST, please do so. They will be published literally right at 8 on both Twitch and YouTube. Those are for the next 2 episodes. What those episodes are going to be is actually going to be probably flip-flopped. So the next episode that will air will actually be a status update rather than an MLP CCG video. So next week, be ready for a status update. We'll talk about a little bit about what I have planned in the next month. There won't be much to go over, so we might have something MLP CCG related maybe. The next one will be talking about stored championships. So anyways, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. thanks for staying with Dratta Talks. As always, guys, if you're looking to contact me, you can contact me via dratta.arcana@gmail.com. You can contact me via Dratta Arcana Gaming on Facebook. And as always, this is Dratta Arcana. If you're looking for any more of my content, you can check my Twitch channel or my YouTube page. And as always, guys, no but Dratta comments. And this is Dratta Arcana. We'll see you guys on the next video. Take care. Bye.